What's up everybody, Matt Maran here for another car review. This is of course the 2020 Cadillac XT6 Sport. Huge thanks to Cadillac for providing me with the all-new 2020 XT6 to review for you guys today. So about the XT6, well, this is the new larger crossover here from Cadillac that slots in between the XT5 and the Escalade. This is a 3-row crossover, so it does have that space similar to the Escalade, but does it in a smaller package, and it's on this car-based platform. It's a crossover SUV instead of the truck-based SUV like the Escalade. But I have to say that, man, this thing looks so good. So this is one of the first of the new Cadillacs that are based on the Escala concept, which it just makes for a really striking SUV, and especially this sport model is really hunkered down and gives it this really sleek appearance, and I just think it looks incredibly stunning. And you know, with this one you have the blacked out grille here on the Sport and the larger wheels and stuff, but even the premium luxury trim, which has some chrome accents there in the front and stuff, also looks striking. Either way, you can't go wrong. They both look really, really good. Just comes down to your personal preference. Coming down to the size of the vehicle here, again, it's very just slick and lean looking. You know, it doesn't have any of the plastic body cladding or anything to make it look more like a crossover. You know, I love how everything's painted here on the sides, and it just gives it a really, really good appearance. Out back, you also have those taillights that drop down, and they are a smokier appearance here for the Sport model versus the more reddish ones you'll get on the premium luxury trim. But I love that smokier look. Either one looks good. Again, I love the taillights on both of the XT6s here. Otherwise, you know, just a nice and simplified back end. You also do have the 400 badge there in the back, which is supposed to signify torque in a roundabout way. It's a little odd, but you know, it does designate kind of what type of engine this has. This one has a naturally aspirated V6. But anyway, so yeah, overall, I think that the XT6 here looks fantastic. All right, so let's start up and go for a drive. The XT6 here has the same very nice Cadillac key they've had for the past few years with a satin finish both for the metal and for the plastic here. It's just very silky feeling. Just a few buttons there on the back. One of the nicest luxury segment keys in my opinion. Just so nice and small too. But of course, it's keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the engine start button, and it starts right up. Also, if you're curious to hear about the interior in the XT6, my wife and I did a whole separate interior review video you can go watch. I'll link that above. And we go through all the details of this interior and how spacious it is. But overall, it is very cool here. This Sport trim has this golden carbon fiber, and overall, it feels pretty luxurious and premium in here. All right, so setting off here in the 2020 XT6. So the first thing you notice, well, it's a very airy cabin. So, you know, with the XT6, you can kind of sit a little bit lower than you would in something like an Escalade. You still have a very, you know, pretty good view of the road. It's, you know, just not quite as high as, you know, the huge SUVs, but still a really good view forward. You do have this dash pad though that comes up a little bit high, but otherwise a good view forward. You know, you have a nice little window here at the A-pillar, so that isn't too thick or anything. And a view out of the back is also spectacular because this one has the optional camera rear view mirror that Cadillac has in many different models now, and so that's great to have as an option, and so that helps, you know, if you have a bunch of people sitting in the back so they don't obstruct your view. But you can, of course, flip it back to have a normal mirror if you don't want the camera, but I think that's a really cool feature and very useful. Other things to note here about the XT6. Well, it's very refined in here so far. It's, you know, just a pretty smooth ride. Of course, it has that car-based ride. I mean, you drive an Escalade and then you hop in this. I mean, this is going to be way smoother, way more comfortable than an Escalade would be. And so other things here with the Sport trim, there's a lot of different unique tuning things here to the Sport that the premium luxury version doesn't have. So you have, for example, quicker steering here in the Sport, which we will, you know, see how that works out on a back road. You also have a sharper throttle response, and you also have quicker shifts and sportier shifts, and that's all been programmed to be a little bit sportier. You also have an adaptive suspension system here in the Sport version. Now, it isn't a magnetic ride control system, so it's not as advanced as, you know, that magnetic ride control you do get in some other Cadillacs and other General Motors products, but it does, you know, give you some variability there so that, you know, you can have a sportier or softer ride depending on the drive mode and stuff. So that's nice to have. And so, you know, it it feels a little sharper here for the sport version, I'm assuming, than over the premium luxury version. I've not driven the premium luxury to directly compare the two, but what I will say is that, you know, the steering has an appropriate weight for a crossover, has a little bit of extra heft to it though, which I do appreciate here. It's not super light like some other SUVs in this segment. Throttle response is very responsive. Transmission is very eager to downshift. It's a 9-speed automatic here in the XT6, and that's good. Also, the sport trim comes standard with all-wheel drive, and it's a torque vectoring all-wheel drive system as well here in the Sport, so that should help with the handling as well. But just having all-wheel drive as standard is nice, but you can drive still in just strictly two-wheel drive mode if you'd like, and it will display whatever mode you're in there on the upper left corner of your gauge cluster. But I put it up into the sport driving mode, and let's turn down onto this back road here and see how it does. Here we go. Okay, nice and responsive. Pulls very nicely, and man, that V6 sounds good too. It really sings. So the XT6 here runs the 3.6 liter V6 engine, naturally aspirated. It has 310 horsepower, 271 pound-feet of torque, and it will do 0 to 60 in about 6.9 seconds according to Cadillac. So, you know, very solid numbers. And that 9-speed automatic is very good at giving you those shifts, and now in sport mode it's kind of hanging on to those higher RPMs a little bit, but then it will drop down, so it's not super aggressive with the transmission tuning there in sport mode. But it you know, gets up and goes pretty well. While we're up at some higher speeds here, the one thing I am noting is that the brake pedal, you don't get much action for the first 1/3 of your pedal travel, almost a half of your pedal travel, before you start really getting some good bite out of the brakes. And I can understand that makes it easier to have smoother stops, and I don't like brakes that are super touchy, but I would like a little bit more bite towards the top of the pedal to give me a little more reassurance, because as this one is, you know, it's like my first few times hitting the brakes, I was like, okay, where's the brakes? And then they come in. You just have to give it a lot of pedal effort there. Another cool thing about the sport trim of the XT6 is that you have magnesium shift paddles. So we will go ahead and put it over into the manual shift mode here and try some downshifts here. Pretty responsive. Okay, I was not doing anything for the upshifts. It was weird. I was upshifting and it didn't do much. Yeah, it's very delayed. So the magnesium shift paddles are very nice. That's something from the old CTSV and stuff. But here I would just leave the transmission to do its own thing, because it's not a very involving experience doing the manual shifts. But we're coming up to some corners here. Let's see how the XT6 handles them. So this is a pretty heavy beast. These weigh, I think, just under 4,700 pounds. But it's doing okay here. It's not too bad. And as I am leaning on those brakes more, they are reassuring once you know how much effort you need. And it handles itself fairly well. So, you know, we are running 265 wide tires all around, so you have pretty good grip. They're all seasons here, but, you know, pretty large wheels, and so that certainly helps you. Also, you know, this road is pretty rough, so you hear some more road noise here on this road. And it's there. I would like it to be a little more insulated for an SUV that, you know, costs over $70,000, as this one is spec'd out. It's not the most luxurious. There are some others that do isolate you a little bit better, I think. But I think this handles better than a lot of the competition as well. Now, I still think like an Acura MDX handles better, but I think that a Lexus RX-L would handle worse than this. So to kind of put it into perspective, you know, the RX is a little more wallowy. This is definitely more buttoned down, especially here, the sport trim. But I still think the MDX is a little more effortless and flat with its handling and a little more confidence inspiring. But both the MDX and the XT6 here do have a torque vectoring rear differential. So, you know, I couldn't really feel it doing a whole lot. It, you know, it didn't make this thing feel like it has superpowers or anything, but you know, the XT6 handles itself pretty well. And, you know, I'm doubting that most people that buy an XT6 are really going to be hustling it down a back road. But if you do, just know that it handles itself pretty well for what it is. You're not going to be too disappointed or anything. But then whenever you're behind traffic and going at a slower pace like I am now, it's totally smooth, totally capable. But we're going to do another acceleration with the wheel turned here. Felt a little bit of torque steer there, but it really gripped grips well. There was no wheel spin or anything that I could actually feel or hear. So it does a good job of clawing you out of that corner whenever you are, going full throttle here, which is impressive. It was interesting though, because some of those corners I was just going around, whenever you hit the gas and you are having the wheel turned, I kept hearing this odd sensation from the footwell area, almost like an electric thing was going on. Some motor was kicking in or something electrically. I don't know if that was it doing the torque vectoring thing, or sending power around, or what was going on. I also don't know if that's a pre-production thing, because that seems a little unrefined. If that is a production car thing, I don't know why that kept happening. But now just cruising on a main road that's nice and smoothly paved here. This is where the XT6 really shines. Just the normal commuting stuff, daily driving. It really does a great job, but it's just very quiet and smooth. And so if you're someone that's, would like something with 3 rows that's luxurious, but you don't want to go up to a truck thing like an Escalade, I think this is going to be more fuel efficient probably with its V6. And you have, almost as much space here, aside from, of course, the Escalade L versions, those long ones, the long wheelbase one, it's going to have more space behind the 3rd row. But, for comparing the short wheelbase Escalade versus this, you're going to have pretty similar space, and you have much better driving dynamics here in the XT6, I think. Although you don't have the grunt of the V8 from the Escalade, but you also don't have as much weight to lug around like you do in the Escalade. So it's kind of a give and take. Comes down to personal preference a lot as well. But overall, I'm really impressed with the XT6 so far. But anyway, thanks to Cadillac, I'm going to have the XT6 here for an entire week. So I'm going to drive around all week, and I'll come back and give you guys my real-world fuel economy, as well as any other thoughts that I have here during my week of driving here, and also comparing it to the competitors and its pricing. Alright, so I've been driving the XT6 for a week now, and it's a very nice vehicle to cruise around in. Now, I will say that, there were a few times going around corners, just even, normal daily driving, where the handling was a little softer than I would like. Cadillacs usually have, pretty sharp handling, and the XT4 by Cadillac obviously is a much smaller SUV, but that was really sporty with its handling, and I loved that. This obviously isn't going to be as good because it's larger and heavier and stuff, but it just didn't feel anything even remotely close to the XT4 as far as its handling setup and the way the suspension was tuned and stuff. Also, the brake pedal is a little more spongy than I would like. I wish it was a little more positive with its feeling, but there's a lot the XT6 does really well. For example, the cylinder deactivation, I wouldn't even know that it was doing it unless I had this, little display here on the gauge cluster, which shows me whenever it goes into V4 mode instead of V6. But it does a really good job of, turning itself off whenever it, can, in order to, maximize your fuel economy and stuff. Speaking of my fuel economy here in the XT6, I've put 108 miles on the vehicle in the week I've had it here, and it's done pretty good. I've got 17 mpg. Now, I did do a little bit of highway driving as well as, mostly city driving, but I'd say maybe 20% of my driving was on the highway. And so 17 mpg is pretty decent, because these are rated at 17 in the city, 20 combined, and 24 on the highway. And so I'm not, really too disappointed with that, because generally I end up getting 1 or 2 mpg less than the city rating in my weeks of driving these vehicles, even with, a very similar amount of driving on the highway and stuff. And so, that's not too bad. I mean, 17 is about what you get with most other V6 powered 3-row crossovers. And so, I think that's right in line with the rest, and no complaints there as far as fuel economy goes. Obviously, it's not great compared to like some of the hybrid options you can get. Like Lexus offers a hybrid version with the RXL you can get, and there's, stuff like that, but it's very hard to find. Like Volvo has the XC90 with its plug-in hybrid variant, which actually gives you more power and some electric range. That's going to be the clear winner if you want something that gets good fuel economy in this luxury 3-row segment. But also the Volvo XC90 I really enjoyed as well. It is very similar with its pricing. That is one thing. The XT6 comes in a little bit higher than some of the others, which I'll get to in a minute. But the XC90 was a little softer with its handling setup, I think, as well, but it did handle very good, and it gave you a little bit more space, I think, as well. But those also feel a little bit bigger. This feels a tiny bit smaller than the Volvo, I think, does. I feel like you're sitting a little bit lower here in the Cadillac than you do in the Volvo as well. And but I do really like the Volvo, and that's another solid choice, again, if you want something that gives you a little bit better fuel economy. But the last thing to mention here, though, is the pricing here. So this XT6 Sport trim starts at about $57,000. This one, loaded up with all the options it has, comes in at about $72,000. And that is high. Like, you can't even get an MDX to $72,000 if you tried. The RXL, I don't think, can even get there even if you tried. but the Volvo is similarly priced to this. So this isn't like the highest in its segment as far as pricing or anything. It is competitive with some of the others, and actually this does undercut some of the larger German luxury competitors. So stuff like an Audi Q7 can easily balloon to, you know, well over $70,000. And you know, like I actually reviewed a BMW X7. Now the one I reviewed was the twin turbo V8 version, which is faster and everything, but they do have an inline 6 turbocharged version, which will actually give you even more power than this V6 does in the Cadillac here. But like a BMW X7, I mean, even the cheapest versions of those are starting around like 70,000. And I mean, with any kind of options, because the Germans don't give you anything for free, with all the options you got to load up on an X7, you know, if you want a well-equipped one, you're going to be looking at something close to 6 figures for those. So the Cadillac does kind of undercut some. It's kind of in this weird middle ground where it's a little bit bigger than stuff like an MDX and a little bit more expensive, but then it's less expensive than some of the larger, you know, luxury 3-row crossovers. So it's kind of an interesting middle ground here. And obviously I think Cadillac has the Escalade, and the brand new Escalade that is coming out this year is very impressive and will really fight the X7 and stuff like that, I think, a little bit better. But, you know, this is a nice option for those who don't need a big truck SUV. They don't need a V8. You know, this V6 was plentiful as far as power goes in my week of driving with it. But there are a few things that could be improved. One thing I really love, though, is the safety tech here in the XT6. So stuff like, you know, whenever you're reversing and it detects cars passing behind you, and other vehicles, it'll give you some loud alert. In this, it just vibrates the seat to get your attention, which I much prefer. And only GM does that. And I wish that others would copy them, because I love that. It's so much less obtrusive, and your other occupants in the vehicle don't even realize it's happening. Unfortunately, though, the XT6 here debuted before, I guess, Cadillac was ready to put its Super Cruise, awesome, you know, adaptive cruise control system here in the XT6. So it doesn't have it yet. I believe I heard that it will be getting it in the future. How far in the future, I don't know. I'm guessing the next model you hear, maybe 2021, they'll add Super Cruise. But that is the one omission, because whenever you're spending $72,000 on a luxury crossover, like, it does have normal adaptive cruise control, but it doesn't have any kind of lane keeping assist. So it does have a warning that you can turn on if you want, but it doesn't have any actual guidance or assist on the highway with steering. Truly a first world problem, not a big deal. I like driving myself, so I didn't miss it, but I do know that Cadillac Super Cruise technology is the best adaptive cruise control system, hands down, literally, because with the Super Cruise, you know, it has a driver monitoring thing, and on highways where Cadillac has deemed it is safe, you can turn on the adaptive cruise and have the car do all the steering for you. And I've tested that system extensively in the CT6, and in that it was fantastic, and I think it's the best adaptive cruise control system on the market today, period. Better than Tesla, better than all that stuff. And so I think that if this had that Super Cruise technology, this would really give it a huge edge over the competitors who don't even have that, and many of them don't even have a very good adaptive cruise system. So once this gets Super Cruise, then this will be the crossover to beat if you're doing long highway drives, because having that, it's amazing, just the fact that you have your hands resting on your lap instead of on the steering wheel. It's amazing on the highway road trip I did in the CT6 how much fatigue that removes from the driver. It's pretty impressive, and it's very well done. So I'm very excited for Super Cruise to be in this. It'll really help the XT6 to be even more competitive. But as it is right now, it's a tiny bit behind because you don't have any of that steering assist. But nevertheless, this is a great starting point for the XT6. You know, I think it would be nice if they put a more sophisticated engine in this as well. This naturally aspirated V6 is fine, but I think in this segment, some do expect a little bit more power, since a lot of the competition does offer more power. So it would be nice if they were able to put in, you know, one of the turbocharged engines from the General Motors lineup in this at some point down the road to, you know, give it a little bit more grunt. But, you know, it was fine. I had plenty of power in my week of driving. The only last thing I do want to mention, though, is I don't like the way their all-wheel drive system is set up in this. So, you know, it has like an auto mode, I guess, because you can just leave it in all-wheel drive mode all the time, but that's all tied into the drive modes. And so to get the best fuel economy, I actually had it in two-wheel drive mode most of the week. And so that does help you really get the best fuel economy possible, but most other vehicles just do it in the background for you and disconnect the rear wheels whenever it's not needed and automatically bring them in. Whereas if I'm getting caught in a rainstorm, I gotta hurry up and go over to the drive mode and put it into all-wheel drive mode to get that all-wheel drive capability. It will not switch over on its own. So that is something I wish, you know, it did just automatically sense, hey, you need all-wheel drive, there's some slippage here. Instead, this thing will do a front-wheel drive burnout if you let it. And so that's just kind of an odd thing for this segment, again, to force the driver to, you know, make that selection to all-wheel drive. drive. You can just drive around in all-wheel drive mode all the time. I'm just assuming you'll get less fuel economy. But I guess it's interesting they let you choose, and it is nice they have the sport mode again, which has the torque factoring that I mentioned earlier and the sportier setup. That is something that is great to have. And so overall, you know, I'm pretty impressed with the XT6. It is very cool little crossover here. I think it's pretty competitive with most of the other stuff out there, and overall, I think, again, with the gorgeous looks combined with eventually this having the Super Cruise tech and stuff, this will be one of the top contenders in its segment. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on the XT6 in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.